Hey, what's up, everybody? Today we're going to be ranking the United States presidents, all 45 of them, based chronologically in order. And yeah, obviously, I'm going to put out some recognitions. I have biases in obviously my politics and where these people stand, but I'm going to be trying to do it mainly based off facts and what they did on as president to impact the country. And just noting, I'm shooting this straight through, no breaks. So we're going to get right into it. And I'm going to try to explain them, a brief explanation of why they were there. Each one, but not too lengthy. All right, we'll start with George Washington. He's S tier, the founding father of the country. He's the biggest reason as to why America is here today, and he absolutely deserves. He's my number one president of all time, just because he could chose. This is the main reason, because he could have put America on any path he wanted. He could have became a king and kept it, but he didn't want to. He didn't want him to be the king of America. He wanted this country to be different than every other country in the world. So, for him to make it how there's a president involved, now the president has power, but not all the power, and splits it up equally. It's just brilliant. And for the first time in history, we have something where the government does not control everything in the outcome, but the people have a say. And I just give him so much credit for that, for putting the country together and putting us on a trajectory to where we end up and where we are today. Okay, next we had John Adams. As a president, that's the thing. I get a D plus. I'll give him a D plus, but mainly because Alien Sedition Acts and XYZ affair. He was so good as a founding father. Did so much work for this country, especially during the Revolutionary War with the Continental Congress. But as a president, strictly, those two, since there wasn't really that much going on, those two things, Alien Sedition Acts, XYZ affair, just derail his presidency, in my opinion. But as a person, I really like Adams, but just as a president, I can't rank him that high. All right, for next up, we got Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson, he's A tier. He did some really good things. Created the military academy at West Point. That was really big. Louisiana Purchase was huge, and yeah, just did some good, solid things like that. People like to talk about the slavery and all these issues. Like, about half these people have owned slaves on this list, so if we shouldn't get into that type of issues, because people view past history through modern eyes, and you just can't do that. So you have to view it through their lenses, which is impossible to do, obviously, because you're not growing up in that time period. So I like to leave stuff like them owning slaves out of this discussion, and more what they did. You have to look past that. We don't, but you have to look past that in a way to see what they actually accomplished as president and what trajectory. Like, Louisiana Purchase is a big reason why Jefferson is up here. Okay, James Madison. Solid B. He was good. War of 1812 did that. Good leadership there. Yeah, not much else to say about him. Just a solid leader in the War of 1812, and technically the war was a draw, but burned the White House. Could have gotten much worse. So I mean, didn't need to get him in it. I still don't blame him for that, but still, good president. Monroe, average. He was a C. You're noticing some of these I'm not gonna have lots to say about. It's just because they didn't really do that much. So I'm gonna try to keep it brief. And from there, on some of these, Monroe really didn't really do much. But founding father, again, all these early presidents I have to rank high. Other than Adams, I feel really bad putting him in a D. But because especially like Jefferson, man, any of these early presidents could have turned this country into a tyranny or a monarchy with the click of a finger, man. Like, I swear, the fact that they kept it on this trajectory and kept the tradition of what Washington set until FDR, obviously, with the 2 terms. The fact that he was able to, that these early presidents were able to keep the country united and not being so greedy for power to become a monarchy, basically. And the fact that none of them felt the need to do that, it didn't do that at all, and wanted to keep passing this on to become a democracy, basically. So the fact that they didn't try to do that is why I appreciate these people so much. All right, John Quincy Adams. Another one, C tier. Really, just didn't do that much. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about Quincy Adams. Andrew Jackson, really controversial for a lot of people, but some people are gonna be mad at this, but he's going in B tier. He did some really good. He did some good things, and he had to clear the national debt, and this was the last time ever the national debt was at zero. Was under his administration, and I think that was huge. Just doing that alone. Did some other good things. I just not gonna get into it too much, but because we got a ton of presidents, and I don't want this video to take a year. So he did some really good things. Everyone talks about the trail tiers. Fact is, like, people say he was racist towards these people. I mean, I think in his mind, obviously, I'm not that would derail what he's done, but in his mind, he was putting Americans first, I think, and he was putting them ahead of these people because he just saw them as outsiders. But the fact is, he adopted a kid that was Native American. So I don't think it was exact hostility towards them, but yeah, I don't know. People have very strong feelings. They'd rank him in F tier, but he's not an F tier. He kept his country in a good spot. Founded the Democratic Party, not the same party as it is today. Absolutely not. Completely changed. But yeah, just I think he was a solid president. B minus. So yeah. Van Buren. Just really he didn't really do much of his own. He was just a continuation of Jackson, really. Yeah, nothing crazy with him, but he'll go in C tier. He was average. William Henry Harrison, president for a month, didn't really do much. Common misconception is people say the reason he died was from the speech he made on his inauguration. Where he was out for 2 hours with no coat on and stuff, but he didn't actually get sick until 3 weeks later, so it was not from that. But he did die of pneumonia, that they say. So yeah, common misconception is he killed himself by staying out there in the freezing weather, but wasn't actually that. But he was only president for like a month. Then we got John Tyler. Really didn't do, like, a lot of these presidents you notice in this era really did not do a lot until the next one. He did pretty good stuff, but he's just gonna go in C tier. Really didn't do much. Polk I got an A tier. James Polk, really, people forget about him a lot. One-term president. The reason I respect him so much is he kept his word. Says, I'm gonna serve one term, get everything I can accomplish in 4 years, and then I'm done. With the Mexican-American War, I think his leadership was tremendous. Really good, some really good stuff. And yeah, the outcome of that turned in our favor, which was good. Obviously lost lives. People don't like to talk about war and say, oh, you got us in this war or that war, but people need to realize that sometimes it's just inevitable, and if it's for the benefit of the country, the people that are serving, the soldiers, they want to serve. They're not getting forced in the battle, unlike Vietnam. Yeah, we'll get in that, but most of the time, like, when we see people today in Afghanistan, they want to be there. It's not that they're getting forced there. They want to make a difference. So when people bring that up, it's kind of like, how do you know, like, what's best for these people? Okay. Zachary Taylor. Nothing crazy with him. As well, same with Millard Fillmore. He didn't really do much. I gotta put him as C tier. I'm just going through these ones quick because they're like, he was a general sailor. I don't know. As a general, he was very good, but again, presidency wise, they did not do a whole ton. Franklin Pierce, oh, man, what a tragic. He's going to D tier because I just can't put him in F like some people, but man, he could have been a good president if, like, he was on his train to get sworn in Washington, and he gets in a train accident, and his son is decapitated right in front of his face, and that's just absolutely horrible. So for the rest of his term, he just drunk himself into, like, he was drunk almost like every night. He was in a terrible state, didn't really care much. He just did whatever he wanted, basically. He was in such a horrible mindset. And I can't put him in F. He did some things like the Kansas-Nebraska Act, like an uprising towards the Civil War. But man, the fact that happened right in front of his face, I just can't imagine what he went through there. And I'm gonna have to put him in D tier just because his things were not good, escalating towards the Civil War, which really escalated it. Next, James Buchanan. He's an F tier. He's not my worst president, but he's definitely an S tier, S tier, because he did lead to the Civil War. I do think the Civil War would have happened regardless of him, because he just didn't do much to stop it. That's the thing. He really didn't do anything. So for that alone, he's at the bottom. But he's not my worst president, and I'll explain why when we get to him. All right, Lincoln, S tier. Another time where the country is on the brink of it's not together. Basically, the country's not together. States have seceded from the Union. So with that, to bring it back together, this is when there are times of such critical need for leadership. Lincoln showed up, and that's what you need from your leaders when they're in awful times. They need to show up. Washington, when the country wasn't even there, he put it together. That's why these are in S tier above all else, because most of these presidents had a secure country coming in, not completely secure, but pretty damn secure. Lincoln had states seceded when he was sworn in, as soon as he was elected. So he goes in S tier for me. And obviously winning the Civil War. Johnson, now we're talking awful. Johnson is below Buchanan because botched Reconstruction completely, set it back for another 100 years about, and this is mainly because his bad policies. This dude was a racist, and like I don't like to say that because you can't view past history through modern vision, because I really like to keep that word out of it. But this guy completely botched it, and said this all the Civil Rights Act, like from freed African Americans from the Civil War, got completely set back about 100 years because of him. It could have been so much better. This set up Jim Crow, set up the KKK. We'll get to the next president about the KKK too, but he just absolutely destroyed it. The thing about Buchanan that makes him worse, I mean less worse, is he just did nothing. But Johnson, he made things worse. He made things a lot worse, and did not care for the slaves that were now free at all. So he goes in F tier. Grant. People might not like this. He's going in B. He did some really underrated things for civil rights. So you come off Johnson with an awful presidency. Alone, though, that's going to set it back. Grant, you can't really do much to stop it, but he did help. He basically dismantled the KKK. But obviously we see a resurgence under a future president. But for the time being, he basically dismantled them, and that was huge. Did some other really good things for civil rights, but there's obviously corruption there, which is why he's not any higher. And he was just a good man. He's some good character. Rutherford, we got Rutherford B. Hayes. He's D tier. Some really shady things he had in office, and then really just didn't do much, especially in the ways of Reconstruction after Civil War. Yeah, he's in D tier. Garfield, I don't have to put in C. I think he could have been one of our best presidents ever, but he was shot, and the doctors literally killed him. If they did nothing and let the bullets sit in him, he would have been alive to serve the rest of his term, because they were jostling around, messing with it, and it just caused him to bleed out and die. It's horrible. Chester Arthur, he was D tier. He was really never fit to be president, and with Garfield dead, he's such a smart individual. He just didn't really do much and wasn't fit to lead. Cleveland, I used to have Cleveland higher up, but I've learned about some of the things he's done, and he obviously went on a major scandal that's nobody really knows about. He has a serious sex scandal, or I don't know, but rape or something, and he was involved in that. And people talk about his good character, but clearly not. And so this is apparently worse than stuff like Clinton, that is all mainstream and stuff. But the fact that that went so undercover, I just had to move him down. And I mean, he did some good things. First term was okay. Second term was not really great at all. He was the only president to win, lose, and then win again. So yeah, where to put Harrison, who came after them, and then before him, because he served afterward him as well. Another C tier, like a lot of these presidents just did not do enough. Getting to a good stretch here where a lot more happened during them, but he just didn't do a whole lot. All right, we're already 15 minutes in the video, so I'm gonna try to hurry up. McKinley, C tier. He was assassinated. I can't really think much of McKinley at the moment. Definitely was not an awful president. People talk about I don't know, Spanish-American War. I'm pretty sure it was under McKinley, but people like to throw wars and put blame directly on the president as it's his complete fault. I mean, they definitely have responsibility, especially in sometimes like Vietnam. I'll get to that later, but man, I don't know. I think he was mediocre. Teddy Roosevelt, A tier. He was good, very good, some really good stuff. He's definitely not higher because he wasn't in a time period again that was on like where he had to actually do something to prove his leadership within the country, and it's not his fault, but he just wasn't. So in my opinion, that's what makes him not as higher. Did some really good things with the environment, setting up numerous national parks. Was a trust buster. He was the first progressive president to really go after trusts. He was for the workers. Pure Food and Drug Act he passed, but for the workers, what I really liked is there was a coal mine strike, and these coal miners all walked out, and the owners of them tried to meet with Teddy because they thought they could convince Teddy to let them, but he completely just said no to the owners and set policies demanding that they pay the owners to pay their fair share to the workers. And some good stuff by Teddy because he realized they're getting treated completely unfairly, so and made the owners pay for it for not paying them fairly, basically. All right, Taft, we got. He was a B. Yeah, I'm just because I like Teddy, I'm not gonna put Taft lower. Obviously, successor to Teddy. He thought he was gonna be great. Didn't go so far along Teddy's lines, but he was like a real conservative guy. He did bust a lot. He did a lot of trust busting. Yeah, did a lot of that. It was like a lot of people like to talk about his weight and stuff. Barely fit in a bathtub apparently, stuff like that. Yeah, he was kind of. I think he was a B tier. He did some good things with that, and I don't know. He not much else to say. One-term president until we get to the next one. Who did a lot. Unfortunately, not a lot good though. We got Woodrow Wilson. He is F tier as well. Again, a president who completely. I don't like to use the word racist, but he was, and in this time period especially, he really showed it. Under his administration, the KKK had a massive resurgence. When we talk about things they did, it was under this time period in the 1900s, not during Grant's administration. So Grant basically dismantled them, and then they have a massive resurgence, like 50,000, 100,000 members, and all of these attacks were under Woodrow Wilson's administration, just because he was basically for them. He screened a documentary Birth of the Nation in the White House, just showing he's for them, and all these attacks that happened he has basically publicly supported them. And he did some other awful things. Espionage and sedition acts were just terrible. It's like a rewrite. He bringing the past back to the 1900s. So he's bringing these acts like the sedition acts from like stuff like John Adams did, and he's bringing that back to the 1900s. Like, it's just ridiculous, and that's some awful things he did. And the whole thing with World War I, such a hypocrite there, saying, oh, we're going to keep you out in the 1916 election. He gets elected, goes right into war. If anything, they should have done what Teddy said, go into war early. And people predicted that the war would have been over 2 years, or like even 3 years earlier than it was, if the U.S. would have intervened earlier. Warren Harding. He was a D tier. His whole administration was just smothered with corruption. He wasn't a real good president. Teapot Dome is a lot what people think about. A lot of corruption there. He was an F tier just because I can't put him on par with the guys there. He just didn't do that much to alter the country like they did, but he just wasn't a good president. D minus for sure. Calvin Coolidge was a B. Really underrated guy. I really like him as a person. That's the thing. Super humble, and good economy during his time period as president. Did some good things, and he gets like a B, solid B, average B, in the middle, because yeah, it's definitely you got a stretch of two pretty awful presidents, and to come back and have Coolidge is good, puts the economy in the right flowing direction, but then you get Herbert Hoover. He's D tier. I think Herbert Hoover is obviously when the Great Depression happened under, but people really like to just hammer him for it and say, oh, it was completely his fault. I really do think that depression happens at either, like, whether he's president or not. He just didn't do much to stop it at all, which is why he's D, and like D and not higher, or D and not lower, because he could have made it worse. Who knows? But yeah, he just didn't do much to stop it as well. Coming from the Coolidge administration a little bit, the economy was pretty good in his administration. So yeah, that is why Herbert Hoover is a D tier, mainly because of the Great Depression. That's where we lead into FDR, the president who was served the longest. He'll go top of the B tier, B plus for sure. Almost 100% because of his leadership in World War II. It was just phenomenal. You take the America from the 14th largest superpower to number 1 afterward. Just incredible stuff there. And just the way his military, the way he strategized the whole thing, going to war after Pearl Harbor, then the whole attacks on D-Day, setting it up for a massive victory, and it's just tremendous stuff, man. Mainly because of his leadership in World War II. He's not higher because stuff with the New Deal. It definitely lengthened the Depression, and at least he tried some things to stop it. But some of his policies definitely lengthened the Depression, and they just weren't really that good. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff with the New Deal is the reason he's not higher. But the World War II leadership is why he's as high as he is. It was just very good, and especially in that time period, you get 2,500 Americans killed in Pearl Harbor, and he comes back with a crazy speech, and he's like, he brought the country united again. Like, that's something that's so huge about these past presidents that we don't see today, is the country was united under them. That was huge under him, and I think that's, like, in times of war, that was much needed, because a lot of people today and in modern times, they don't see their president as like their ultimate authority, but they didn't see it back then as well. But they definitely respected and looked up to him regardless of how they felt about their policies, and went along with what they did and didn't try to just like absolutely discredit it for what it is, which is some things in the past that I respect so much more. Truman. I'll give him an A minus, mainly because he was put in a really, really tough situation with the bombing the Japanese, which is, I think, was the correct decision, especially in that time period. They were not surrendering. He just had to do something, and that was the right move. This is what the Cold War does start under Truman. Did some not so good things, the Truman Doctrine, but was a solid leader. I think him coming in after FDR died, that was pretty brutal time period. Especially you have so many decisions handed to you. Helped set up the country, now Israel. So yeah, it's some good stuff by Truman. Eisenhower, he's a B. I'm not as high on Eisenhower as some people are. Just because, like, he did some good things like the interstate highway system, NASA, but those are like extra stuff, if you know what I mean. Like, those aren't like absolutely necessary and like proves leadership. Yes, he was a war hero, quote unquote, is what people say, but some of these military people, he hasn't actually served. He if you look at all the photos he's in, he's completely clean and dry, while the soldiers around him are just absolutely smothered with dirt. So he's not ever served, never like served in combat. He's just a leader. So I mean, he obviously, you need leaders and respect him for that, but never got his hands dirty basically. And that's something a lot of people don't know about him. It could be a good thing in your opinion, or it could be bad. But I just don't. He was put in again in times of the Cold War, and just as he was leaving, things really started to escalate, which is where we get to my next president, Kennedy. Kennedy's an A- for me. Okay, so I used to think Kennedy was a bit lower, and then I've been researching a lot on the Cold War and what he did there, and man, he was put in some rough decisions right at the beginning of his presidency too. Man, the whole thing with the Berlin Wall was just absolutely insane. You have tanks pointing at each other on both sides of Berlin, and you're on the absolute brinks of nuclear warfare. If war breaks out there, they're bombing the shit out of each other, Soviets and United States, and you both know if that's happening, it's all out war. And yeah, for him to actually go and talk to the president dictator of Soviet Union at the time, Khrushchev, I think it was, and to settle the peace there, and to call him and say, hey, back up your tanks and stuff, and absolutely handle that well. His leadership during the Cuban Missile Crisis was very good in my opinion. That was a scare with Fidel Castro down in Cuba, sending the Soviets missiles there. He handled that pretty well in my opinion, just because this guy was a leader. That's what I like about presidents, is when they lead the country. They don't do what's best for them most of the time. They do it to lead, and they throw out some of their political beliefs sometimes, but they do it to lead the country. And I think that what Kennedy was. He was a leader, a fierce anti-communist, and that's what we needed in the height of the Cold War. Okay, I'm not gonna ignore the Bay of Pigs though under Kennedy's administration. Don't get me wrong, but I can't rank him lower because again, he was trying something. He was doing something to attack. It was a disaster. Don't get me wrong, which is why he's not higher. But man, he did some. You can't completely ignore that though, because it was a pretty big disaster. But he really did some other great things that was in such a critical time period in the Cold War. And that's what people don't forget. The Cold War, it wasn't just like a scare thing, Red Scare, with McCarthyism in the United States and people calling everyone a communist. It wasn't just that. There were so many little uprisings in like the Korean War, the Vietnam War. There's Ethiopia uprising. There were so many rebellions that were happening throughout the world that were actual fights. The Cold War is just whole 40 years summarization, basically. All right. Lyndon Johnson, he is F tier. He's at the top of the F tier because Vietnam, he just did a really bad job. I don't usually rank presidents low because of things they did in wars, but man, what a pointless war, dude. You got Vietnam split. You got one part's communist, one part anti-communist, and you're going to defend the anti-communist part with throwing you're drafting troops, throwing them into a basically jungle where you don't know where your enemies are because they're completely camouflaged, and they're just getting absolutely slaughtered basically. And then it's not even until the next administration where they get pulled out of the war, and they lose it. They don't even win. They lose the whole section of what they're fighting for, and the purpose was to prevent the spread of communism in Southeast Asia, and the whole point of it was just lost. That's the thing. I don't usually blame presidents for this, but you lost that entire section, and you could have done other things instead of just sending troops there on the ground to fight for it, because there had to be other solutions. Not just necessarily talking to them, but you got it's just the whole. I kind of agree with the solution. I mean, the problem trying to solve with the spread of communism, but it's just you just went about it. He just went about it so wrong, and I just think it was not good. All right, Nixon. Nixon's a C. People really like to rank Nixon low, but his foreign policy he did some really good things. And Watergate, which is why he's not any higher, was why he's a C. This whole scandal with it, but Did some really good things. Got us out of Vietnam, which was absolute death sentence. And I don't usually, again, I said this a lot, but I don't usually like to rank wars like this. But, man, he got us out. That was pretty important. Good relationship with Russia. Signed some really important treaties, which postponed action in the Cold War, which was really big because you had some serious threats going around, and the fact that he was able to do this, sign some pretty important deals, really postponed this until the Reagan administration mainly. And if it wasn't for man, he just did messed up some decision, which is why he's in higher. Sure, then Gerald Ford took over as vice president. He's also a C tier as well. I have a lot more to say about these modern presidents, obviously not modern, but like more recent presidents as closer to my era, and I have just a lot more knowledge on them. Just to point out, Carter. He was F tier. I put him ahead of Johnson. And yeah, I know a lot more about these, mainly because they did more things that just everyone nowadays knows about, basically. And okay, let's get back to this. Carter, nice guy, but his administration was an absolute disaster. Economy was failing, which I don't like to judge completely on him. That's just part. That's a small part of it, but the way he handled the Iranian hostage crisis was an absolute disaster, in my opinion. That just drops his foreign policy just through the basement. He was pretty atrocious. Just was not a good leader in this time. Some real issues. And the United States was going through some pretty bad issues. Only a one-term president for this reason in the 70s. And yeah, just pretty abysmal. Reagan, he was A tier for sure. He was towards the top of, he was towards the top of the A tier. Reagan won the Cold War. I don't give all the credit to Reagan. The Soviet Union leader at the time was the first leader to actually go with the United States and be okay with some things. Wasn't completely, but it was okay with the United States and really solve relationships. It was under him that the Berlin Wall fell, which was huge. You had families separated for decades with the Berlin Wall up on both sides of East and West Berlin, and he was the one to solve relations with Russia and finally get the Berlin Wall to fall between communist and anti-communist states. And under his administration, the whole eastern sector that Russia controlled, like Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Germany, they all changed back to their own states and, in fact, elected officials, and that was huge. The forming their own democracies, and that was all under his administration. Did some really good things there. That's mainly why he's that high, and did fix the economy as well. That is true. But yeah, that is why Reagan is an A tier for me. C tier, George H.W. Bush, just the classic. Senator, definitely really moderate guy, and yeah, didn't really do. I don't know, just nothing crazy. Just basically not a continuation of Reagan, but a continuation of this next president, Bill Clinton. Clinton just it was in the 90s. It was a good area for the economy and stuff like that. Just did some good things there. Yeah. You do have to realize the whole scandal with the side of Bill Clinton, but he was like, I'm not trying to like call him, I don't want to say where I stand really, but man, he was just like the person there. He didn't really do much for it. He just passed the bills. All the bills that were sent to him, they passed them. And that's basically how it was. Next, we got George W. Bush. He's D tier. He was not a great president. And a lot of his handling of 9/11, I think he was good leadership at first. And then towards the end of his administration, it just went downhill. Toward 2008, you got the economic crash, market crash. And his leadership was kind of fraudulent, man. This guy he really just didn't. I don't know. He sent. I think it was the correct decision sending the troops in Afghanistan, but and you had some good victories. Don't get me wrong, but some of the things went wrong there. You got I don't know. He just the whole thing. Iraq War, sending him there. I don't like. I'm not trying to blame him for those things because you bombed the Twin Towers. You're going to war with the United States. That's what you expect. But he had no timetable in sight. When you go to war, you have to know your plan and how to execute it and how to get out. He didn't have that, and yeah, that's for that alone. You just again, this guy was like a. This is such a. It's like these three presidents were in a line, obviously, but it's just really they're the same thing, continuation of each other. All right, next we got Barack Obama. Now we're really starting to get to the close modern presidents. He is. All right, I'm gonna get crucified for this, but he's an F tier. He just did some. He really separated the United States. Like he thought in 2008 he campaigned on, we're gonna bring the United States together. We are a united nation. But man, he divided the shit out of it. The whole racial situation, man. People were they're just so today. I really think it's so much more divided today because of the way he presented himself, man. 2012 election, and man, it is just crazy what he did. And the whole transgender thing, they ruled in like sports and stuff. It's just awful. I can't be getting into too much modern stuff. You could obviously see where I lean on this stuff, but let's get into real policies with his Afghanistan war. His presidency, he's the type of person to go after this and say we need to get out of the war. 8 years they were in Afghanistan, and they were with no timetable in sight. This is something that was pretty that they were gonna do it as when he get into president was to take him out of the war, but he did absolutely nothing. I'm not saying that they were there for nothing, because they weren't. They were doing stuff, man. These people were fighting. These troops wanted to be there. That's what people were getting. But for him to go and say and try to do something where you're gonna get out of the war, but then to have 8 years of president and don't, like, come on now. You have the Taliban does fold under him, but then you have the rise of ISIS. ISIS was stronger than ever under Barack Obama, and it wasn't until the next president that it was obliterated. But complete rise of ISIS, that was awful. He was above for that. The whole Obamacare thing was an absolute disaster. He gave some good speeches, man, but he was just not the leader. He really did not stand for the average American. And just look where he is now, man. The guy's rich as hell. Like, I think it's for money, man, because look where he is. And he does not care for the average American. Let me get into Obamacare now. It was just a complete disaster. Costed the average American so much more now because you're favoring specialized people. And it skyrocketed the inflation, which is partially to blame of what's going on today, man, because you're just adding to debt and adding to the skyrocketing the economy. And going on today now, you got the consumer price index up 6.8%. I'm not saying that was because of Obama, but his policies, he first started the radical spending and the real radical spending. National debt's been there since then, but man, the economic policies were pretty awful and just wasn't a leader, man. This guy gave some good speeches, man, but when you portray yourself as something and when you are something are two different things. He just wasn't that. And a lot of people like to give him credit for Bin Laden, but that was absolutely not him. So that was a lady in the either CIA or FBI, probably CIA. No, CIA located the whole thing. All he did was allow it for it to happen. He didn't do shit, and bang, Bin Laden's dead because of Navy SEALs and mainly Rob O'Neill. But okay, next president, Donald Trump. This is where it gets divided. I'm gonna rank this as fairly as possible. I think it was C tier. Did some good things, did some not so good things. But I think he did some good things because right now the way our country's trending is a lot worse than what he's than what it was back when he was president. In my opinion, he completely wiped out ISIS. That's why he was higher up. Did some really good things there. Man, he was so for the evacuation of the troops in Afghanistan, but that literally did not happen until the next administration after him, which is not on here because Biden has not completed his presidential term. And yeah, but it's like he said he was gonna do it, man. He was gonna, but he just didn't have time. It didn't within his administration. So economically, his policy economically wise was tremendous. I think he did some really good things. Did some really good things with Israel. That's why Obama's also an F. His relations with Israel were not good at all. You had some serious stuff with the Gaza missile strikes under Obama. Under Obama. Yeah, Israel was in some serious bad situations. You have to care about your allies in this. And Obama did not. Trump did, and he really improved relationships there with Netanyahu, and really just showed relations to be Trump did some bad things. I think his handling of COVID was not the best, not the worst either, which is why again fits in the C tier. Because I can't get into modern stuff as much, but it just was not the best. You people saying 235,000 Americans that are dying, but now we got over 800K. So again, it was bad. I mean, it was mediocre. That's why you can't blame it when it goes worse afterward. So you can't look at it and say it was horrible when it's gotten worse. So yeah, Trump, some really good things policy wise and socially, bit of a nut job. I mean, dude's just like, I don't know, he is not the sharpest, but his personality flaws are pretty present. Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of Trump. I think he was a C. I think he was a decent president. I think the country's in a better spot than it was with Obama. Economy is at an all-time high. I know a lot of people like to talk about the economy. I think it's important, but there's just some other things that decisions they make that are above that, in my opinion. Like him wiping out ISIS was huge. People, I didn't even know. I knew who ISIS was back in 2015, 2016, but I didn't hear about it when Trump was president. And I look back and I do the research, and he just completely obliterated them. And I think that was important. So that's my presidential tier list, everybody. Oh, one more thing about Trump. Everyone likes to talk about when he's campaigning, the whole thing with the border, and now look what we're seeing. We're seeing the highest border people coming across the border there's ever been. And under Trump, it was the securest ever been. And people talked about all the kids being in cages under Trump's administration. From the past, people in Obama's are now criticizing Trump with that. And now there's more than ever kids in cages. So you can't directly. Trump did some really good things at the border. It's really good things with economic policies, and that's why his policies get him up there for get him at C tier. Socially, a little lower, but yeah. Okay, that's my presidential tier list. Here it is. Give me your thoughts. Tell me what you think. Let me know in the comments, and yeah, make sure to like this video if you enjoyed the content. I really try to give my honest opinion. Obviously, we got into the later presidents, more modern. You could obviously see my political briefs. I am center right. I'm not a Republican. No, in my opinion, I classify as whatever I want. I think identifying yourself with political party is mainly for people going into politics and stuff like that. I digress. Yeah, center right leaning in my opinion, and tell me what you think. I think I ranked this as fair as I could. You got guys like Truman, FDR, they're high up, and Kennedy. You got people up here. I try to rank it as fairly. They're all Democrats, and there's obviously some bias here. Obama, Lyndon Johnson, with people in F tier, but I just try to rank it based on policy and what they did mainly. And hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.